All right. Okay. Witnesses, please raise your right hand.
Oh, wait, that works. No. Yeah.
Oh, do you want me to do that? Okay. Do you affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please say, I do.
I do.
You may be seated. The final trial of the Supreme Court of Be Creative is now in session. Judge Barnett will be presiding today. You all may be seated.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Calling the case of State versus Hunter Grooms. Are both sides ready?
Yes. Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Dr. Evelyn Sophia Smith, and this is my co-counsel.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Riley Bowman for the prosecution.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Kelsey Michael.
Thank you. Defense?
Permission to make appearances?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Benjamin, and my counsel is.
Yeah.
Owen.
Thank you, counsel. Your team's may be seated. Bailiffs, please swear in the door.
We already did.
We already did. Oh, that's okay. You may all be seated. You done that? Who's mine?
Yeah, Hunter.
Hunter Grooms. Hunter Grooms, how do you plead in the charges against you?
Well, it's just the defense today, Your Honor, has filed a motion for a new trial for Miss Hunter Grooms.
Prosecution, you may proceed with your opening statements.
Thank you, Your Honor. Opposing counsel, attendance, Your Honor. First, let me start by saying 5 years ago, right here at Be Creative Camp, there were never before seen tragedies. The defendant, who's sitting before you, right here, committed several heinous war crimes. Therefore, they've been in jail for the past 5 years. In today's case, the defense has filed a motion for a new trial for the defendant. They don't deserve one. They're going to come before you today and say that they deserve a new trial because of one thing. The testimony of a prison warden who says that they were the perfect prisoner? Really? That's all you got? You've got to be kidding, right? Surely 5 years of good behavior in prison isn't enough to undo everything that you've done. It's incredible. Your Honor, today we're going to bring up the charges once again and remind you why the defendant was sentenced to prison, and we're going to remind you why they don't deserve a new trial. Now, but let me also remind you, Your Honor, we have no burden in today's case. The defense has filed a motion, and thus all of the burden to prove to you falls solely on the defense. But we're still going to bring before you 3 witnesses today. We're going to bring before you those 3 witnesses who are going to remind you of the atrocities that this monster has committed. And at the end of today's trial, we ask that you firmly deny their motion for a new trial. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, you may proceed with opening statements.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen attending today, we are here to ask you to grant our motion for a retrial for the beloved and incredibly honest Mr. Hunter Grooms over here. He has been so wrongly accused of these crimes 5 years ago and has been begrudgingly serving a prison sentence since then to this day. But he is searching for the justice that he so deserves. Never before have you met someone so kind, someone so hardworking, and someone so giving and generous to the community at any cost, which you will hear from some of our suspects, or some of our witnesses today. Apologies. The witnesses you'll be hearing from today are Hunter Grooms, Skylar, as well as Leslie Grooms, and they are here to tell you today, Your Honor, that Hunter is greatly searching for this justice, and even in the hardest of times, after countless hardships that he's sat through and took it because of how just overall pure this person is. He wants justice, and these witnesses can testify to that kindness and that honesty today.
Thank you, counsel. Prosecution, please call your first witness. You may proceed when ready.
At this time, we would like to call Riley Bowman to the stand. Can we start with please stating your name for the record?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Riley Bowman. I'm, as you may have heard earlier in this week, in several trials, including the trial of Killer. Should I say Kila? I'm the B Creed fanatic. From everywhere from Alien to Zeitgeist, I've pretty much been to them all.
Good evening, Mr. Bowman. So could you start with what's your connection to this case?
Sure, well, as I said, I've been to pretty much every week of Be Creative, and this is no exception. In 2017, I attended a week called Corpse, and I was there when the defendant showed up and threw things out of whack.
I understand. If it's at all hard to talk about this week, we totally understand. Please take your time with this. So, what started to go wrong that week at Corpse?
Well, you know a lot of things can go wrong in the Beach universe, but nothing like this. This was different. When Miss Grooms showed up, everything changed. You know, we were on the same team, Miss Grooms. We were working together, but we weren't. We were never working together. You see, we'd come to an impasse. You know, the two teams at that week at Be Creative, the Wolf Pack, my team, and the other team, Oceanistan. We decided it was time for a war, so we're going to fight some battles. But when Miss Grooms appeared, for some reason, they would disappear just as soon as they appeared. Right before it was time for any battle, they would seemingly disappear, and then something tragic would happen right after that.
And so, what's the first tragedy that happened? What happened?
It's hard to think about, but there was this first challenge. There was a watermelon, and our task was simple. The first person to get a playing card stuck in the rind of that watermelon by a flick would win the challenge. I've seen it done before. I've seen it done at Be Creative. I mean, our dean, he was a trickster. He could do all kinds of crazy things like that. I'd seen it on TV before. I knew it was realistic. But for some reason, after an hour of going at it, just flicking, we could not successfully get any playing cards into that watermelon. And since it was unused, we decided we were just going to reuse it, take it down for dinner that night. Or actually, it was lunch. It was lunch because it was a lunch challenge. You see, we cut up the watermelon and we kind of had an eating challenge, you know, Joey Chestnut style. And it was tough. All I can see in my head is the images of my friends who were poisoned. They were poisoned after this challenge eating that watermelon. I couldn't believe it.
Objection, relevance. The lunch challenge is irrelevant to this case.
May I respond, Your Honor? The lunch challenge is extremely relevant to this case because the first charge in which the defendant today was convicted guilty of involved this very watermelon. The witness was just giving context to what happened to the watermelon, which is extremely relevant to determining the defendant's guilt. Thank you, Your Honor. So, continuing where you were, there was a poisoning. Do you know how this poisoning happened?
Yeah, I do. The first aid person was so overwhelmed with all the people who were poisoned, they called in a medical expert. And that medical expert was able to determine and link those poisonings to that watermelon. How? Well, later, one of our staff members, Joey Boone, he found a canister of clear coat paint. Of course the cards couldn't break the rind of the watermelon. There was clear coat over it. It couldn't stick. It just so happened that that clear coat paint had the fingerprints of the defendant on it, right near the scene.
I understand. It must be a very, very difficult story. So, what happened next?
That wasn't the only tragedy that I witnessed. In another instance, we had a tree hugging competition. The people who could hold on to the trees for the longest with their partner was going to win. But you see, once again, the defendant disappeared right before this happened. I should have known. I should have known. When we arrived, the trees behind Joshua 1, the dorm up there, had all been cut down by some chainsaw. And it was bloody. There were some middle school boys that were behind the cabin, putting out their towels to dry when the trees fell.
Objection to relevance, Your Honor. Our Hunter Grooms was not convicted of murdering. That is not stated in the war crimes.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You.
The specific charge wasn't murdering, but the context of what happened when the trees were cut down is very important for determining the war crimes that did occur, which if you refer to your list, is civilian casualties, considering those middle school boys were civilians and their deaths were indeed casualties of this war. So, you can continue where you left.
Well, like I said, there were some middle school boys that were putting their towels out. They were trapped under the trees. None of them survived.
Do you know what happened to the trees? Does anyone ever figure out how those trees ended up being cut down?
Yeah. As I came to understand later, there was a chainsaw that was found in a location that Grooms had been known to hang out in a lot. I'm familiar with the chainsaw. I know what it looks like.
And do you recognize Exhibit 1 here, the police photograph?
That's a police photograph of that chainsaw. It's a little odd because it looks like it has a nice white background, but it's just because the police took it into evidence and took a high quality shot of it to make sure we got it.
Your Honor, may I enter Exhibit 1 into evidence?
Any objections to entering this to evidence?
Objection, Your Honor.
What grounds?
Well, you see, we traced that image back to its origins. Turns out that image is just a JPEG file of a random chainsaw.
May I respond, Your Honor? You must be confused. The record here that we have, the record that you have clearly reflects that this is the official police photograph. I'm not sure what detective work you went through, but the record is clear.
Turn the image into a text file.
can't argue with the record.
I'm sorry, your objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. So what do you know specifically about that chainsaw?
I know that the police were able to trace that chainsaw, get a high quality photograph, and then they were able to match it to the marks on the trees.
And what do you know about the chainsaw itself? Was there anything specific to that chainsaw?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it was found in a shed, which is a known location where the defendant liked to hang out. There were also the defendant's fingerprints on the chainsaw.
Judge, Your Honor, the fingerprints were not found on the chainsaw.
Your Honor, we'll have to turn to the record here to determine whether the fingerprints were found on the chainsaw. I respectfully request that if they do have an issue with that statement, they can bring it up on cross-examination rather than objecting to it now. Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you, counsel. Defense, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, if I just break it down, I'm sorry, this is just difficult to discuss.
We completely understand.
Order.
So, Riley Bowen, you said that you're a Bee Creek fanatic, correct? And
That's correct.
and you attended a week with Hunter Grooms, correct?
Yeah, where they were trying to prison.
All right. And you brought up earlier the challenge with the watermelon, and so you said in your affidavit you have seen this on TV and other Bee Creek weeks of trying to do this before, right?
That's right, counsel.
And you had accused Mr. Hunter Grooms of using the spray canister to wipe that.
I haven't accused them of that. I simply stated on direct examination, counsel, that their fingerprints were indeed found on that canister.
Do you believe that it's possible that perhaps Mr. Grooms was noticing another maintenance team? Because as you may recall, Mr. Grooms was on the maintenance team for Bee Creek,
That's right.
and all of them would have access to these spray cans.
That's right.
Do you believe it's possible that another maintenance member had sprayed it on there and Mr. Grooms was simply trying to clean it but could not?
That's a great observation, counsel. It's absolutely possible. However, let me note that the defendant's fingerprints are the only fingerprints found on that canister. If they were failing in cleaning it, then there would have been other fingerprints to trace.
Fair enough, I suppose. And you mentioned that these fingerprints and the that all this staining was left on the rind of the watermelon, correct?
Yes, that's right.
If that were the case, how could it have poisoned the watermelon inside if it was simply on the rind?
I'm going to rely on my extensive Wikipedia knowledge here for this, so take this how you will. But remember that watermelon is made out of about 95% water. Water is an absorbent substance. Even though it was just on the rind, it would absorb the chemicals in through the rind and into the watermelon that was eaten.
Would it be fair to at least let Your Honor know that Wikipedia is changed multiple times a day by random people with almost no qualification?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Fair observation.
Although it is a scientific true fact. That's just where I heard it.
And I believe my counsel has discovered that the only fingerprints that were to be found in any of these accusations were to be on the spray canister and not the chainsaw, as you have claimed.
I don't believe that I noted it in my affidavit, but I do believe that it was noted in the police report.
All right. And I know it was brought up earlier and then dismissed soon after, but I would like, if it's okay with Your Honor, I'd like to bring up the chainsaw picture again from the police report. They claimed that it was, you and your counsel has claimed that the reason there was that white background, it appears like that, but because it was taken away for a special police shooting, or for a photo shooting.
That's right, counsel.
Isn't it when you said it was a murder scene, correct? There were two campers that tragically passed away.
About two, I don't exactly remember how many.
Well, if his chainsaw was included in the murder for having, as you claim, as you said, blood on the chainsaw, for specifically cases of that high caliber, aren't the pieces of evidence and weapons supposed to be remained untouched? Therefore, how would they have been able to legally move the chainsaw to another location for shooting to get that right background?
I mean, you're asking me to speculate, but what I will say is that the police have very detailed plans and patterns of ways to deal with evidence. And while I'm not familiar with those practices, I know that it's common. I also would like to mention, counsel, that we did not prepare the exhibits for today's trial. In fact, we got them from the police. So if this photo, as you said, is some sort of JPEG, it's just because it was converted by the police officers and uploaded. I had nothing to do with that.
I understand. I completely understand. I am more just trying to push towards a statement toward the credibility, if you understand, of the image, of how it seems a little suspicious. Can you admit that it seems a little suspicious that a potential murder weapon was removed from its original location and possibly tampered with?
I'm not sure, counsel.
No further, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I'd like to call Kelsey Michael to the stand. Can you state your name for the record?
Sure. My name is Kelsey Michael.
Okay, and what was your involvement at the Bee Creek Week performance?
So I have been going to Bee Creek for quite some time since Florence, which was quite surprising considering Florence was my first camp and how much went wrong. But besides all the tragic events of that week, I really love Bee Creative, and I've been doing quite a few different weeks. But Florence was the theme for that week where all these tragedies happened. It was all centered around a war between the two sides, Oceanistan and the Wolfpack. I was on Oceanistan, a proud member of Oceanistan, along with some of my friends, and I really loved all the battles we were having until everything just started to go wrong.
When you say everything went wrong and you talked about the terrible incidents, what happened that week?
So you just heard from one of my friends here, Riley Bowen, about all the things that they remember. One of the clearest memories I have from that week, it was more than just a coincidence. I mean, it was proof. We were in the old human foosball building. We right on that hill right behind you. I don't know how many of you remember it, but it was there. It was just an old building there that we used to have fun. We had our battle in it that day, and I remember we had a great time. We were playing human foosball, deciding our battle. Everyone was having fun and competing hard. And then as soon as the battle ended, just tragedy struck. The building caught on fire. I mean, it just all of a sudden, it just didn't make any sense. The building was a little damp. It had rained at some point, and it was just, I couldn't believe it because one camper, thankfully everyone survived, but one camper was seriously burned. I don't know how they're even doing. I don't know. I don't remember much about what ended up, what happened, but I know they were seriously burned and had to leave camp, go to the hospital, and it was just, it really shook us all up.
And how was the defendant involved in that?
So the defendant was definitely involved in that because later that everyone wanted to get to the bottom of what happened because it didn't make any sense. How does a damp building up on a hill just sitting there just all of a sudden catch on fire? It didn't make any sense. So there was an investigation. The first thing I noticed that was weird later in the day is I saw the defendant themselves, Hunter Grooms. I saw them playing with matches. And at the very least, I thought how could you be doing that after what we just saw, the tragedy that's happened? And it looks like they were trying to go hide them in a dorm or something. I don't really remember, but I know they had those matches. I just thought that was really weird, but then it all came together later once the report came out from the fire marshal that indicated that gasoline was used to set the fire. The gasoline used to set the fire matched the gasoline that the defendant had their fingerprints on the defendant was using.
So you are familiar with Exhibit 3?
Yeah, is that the report from the fire?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd
very
like
familiar.
to make a motion to enter Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Thank you. Objections? Any objections? You may proceed.
Can you tell us about that exhibit?
Yeah, so this exhibit just shows here, it says the cause of the fire was arson. So it didn't just catch fire, and everyone knew that. And it says gasoline was used to start the fire, because you couldn't just, I mean, even if you had a lighter to it, it wasn't just going to catch on fire. With how damp and everything, the whole situation didn't make sense. And then they found that matches were used to light the gas on fire and light that building on fire. And I just remember the terror, the screams as soon as we realized what was happening. And it wasn't an easy building to get in and out of either, just two small doors in the corner. So everyone trying to rush out. And I remember that, and this report here shows. It shows that the fuel used was found in the shed. They used gasoline from the shed, and they found that the only person who had been using that fuel was Hunter. Their fingerprints were on that, and the final determination from the police and the fire marshal, they all determined that it was arson committed by Hunter.
Nothing further.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Defense, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Okay. So, what's your name again? I forgot, sorry.
My name is Kelsey Michaels.
Kelsey Michael, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Okay. So you have heard about how his good behavior. Do you believe that there's any chance that he did not do this?
I mean, I've heard things about his good behavior, and honestly, before all these crazy things happened, they seem like a good person, but I don't really know what all their good behavior before and after has to do with the fact that what happened is what happened. I mean, the facts are before we can see what happened. So, I mean, when the evidence shows that they did it, I mean, their good behavior doesn't really matter. I think they did it. I know they did.
I see. Okay, so you did say it rained on that day, right?
It had rained that day or just the night before. Sometime though, I remember it was damp outside the building, the wood, it was all damp. You could even smell it in the air.
Oh, so was it raining during the foosball game though?
It wasn't raining at the time. I know it wasn't raining during the foosball game, but I know the building itself was damp in the ground. So
I see. So if the fire was started via gasoline, do you think you or anybody else would have smelled it before the fire was lit?
I mean, maybe someone did. I mean, we're at camp. There's vehicles going by. There's tractors. I mean, we see all kinds of stuff happening. People are using gas for a lot of purposes. So maybe someone smelled it. I don't know if anyone remembered. I don't know if anyone noticed anything. But if we did, I don't think anyone thought anything of it. Either way, and maybe just the wind was blowing. Who knows? Maybe we didn't smell it. But either way, the report says what it says. They used gas.
Well, don't you think that somebody would have mentioned to someone that they smelled gasoline if it was present?
Maybe they did. I honestly can't remember. I mean, looking back, that would have made sense. I can't remember if someone mentioned that or not. If they did, then I don't think just because you smell.
Your Honor, at this time I would like to object. I'm going to object to hearsay. This counsel is asking my witness to rely on an out-of-court statement used for the truth of the matter to base an opinion. This is inadmissible in court.
Defense, do you have an idea?
And I was not aware that I was doing that.
Counsel, by asking if anyone had said anything or heard anything, that's asking him to rely on hearsay, which is inadmissible. Therefore, I ask his testimony be stricken from the record.
I see.
So it is stricken.
That's fine with me.
Thank
No questions.
According to, now, me and the rest of my defense counsel, we did take a look at the fire marshal reports, and obviously stated that Hunter was on maintenance team. So the fact that gas can had his fingerprints on it could have mean he used it to fuel up one of the other machines, and then he
Objection. Lack of personal knowledge.
Defense, do you have an argument?
I'm not sure
It
exactly.
was stated in many of the witnesses' affidavits that he hung around the shed many times, and that he also was a maintenance crew, so it would make sense for him, his fingerprints to be on there beforehand.
Your Honor, specifically for this witness has not mentioned knowing anything about the defendant being on the maintenance staff whatsoever. Therefore, I think that this is out of their realm of knowledge.
Well, they have said that Hunter was with them, and they would have had to know that he was on maintenance staff, because Riley knew that he was on maintenance staff.
Just because I know something doesn't mean that you know it, counsel. Just because that I know the watermelons are 95% water.
Well, weren't you guys on that same team?
No, we were on different teams.
You
I was on Wolfpack. He was on Oceanic Sand.
Okay, we're
I see. So, so, does he have access, and if he was on the maintenance team, he would have had access to that gasoline. And do you think that it's possible that somebody else could have done it? And also with the matches, do you think it's possible that he could have been helping out trying to light perhaps maybe a grill, or perhaps the fire for the middle, or the fire for some other purpose, like a different campfire?
I mean, maybe the matches were used for another purpose, but the investigation was clear. He was the only one who had used the gas can that matched the gas that they used at the fire. And I know that they determined that the matches were used and that they were his matches. I don't know how anyone else could possibly have done it if those facts are clear, which they are in this report.
So he stole the matches.
Either way, the gas speaks for itself. The gasoline. I mean, we can speculate all day, but I don't think we're going to be able to get to the bottom of it when they already have got to the bottom of it in this report.
Okay, no further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Michael, you may step down from the witness stand.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Counsel, your final witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we'd like to call Dr. Smith to the stand. Dr. Evans, Sophia Smith. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening.
Can you please state your name for the court?
My name is Dr. Evelyn Sophia Smith.
And Dr. Smith, what's your profession?
So I have a doctorate in political science, and I work as a political science professor. I am also an expert in war crimes.
Doctor, wow, you must be quite the expert. What is war at Beef Creek, Doctor?
So at Vicree, war is a set of battles between armies. So the campers split armies and they have battles. The battles are both mentally and physically challenging.
Can you give any examples of battles that you're familiar with?
So some examples are tree hugging. One battle was who could hug a tree the longest. There's other battles such as Texas Hold'em.
Texas Hold'em.
Yeah. Uno also. Horse, if you're familiar with the basketball game.
Like the basketball shooting?
Yes, yes. As well as throwing playing cards into watermelon and others.
Okay. Now, in the universe of Be Creative, can you tell me what's considered to be a war crime?
So there's a lot that can be considered war crimes. Generally, cheating is a war crime. Bad sportsmanship, anything like that. But in some cases, there are more brutal examples of war crimes, such as intentionally attacking people.
That sounds brutal. Your Honor, at this time, I motion Exhibit 2 to evidence, the report prepared by the doctor for today's case.
Any objections?
You familiar with what he said? Any objections, counsel?
Any objections? On the page two? I'll allow it.
Exhibit 2 is now in evidence. What can you tell me about Exhibit 2 here?
So Exhibit 2
Objection,
is.
Your Honor.
What?
The witness is not familiar with Exhibit 2 and does not state in her affidavit that she is.
Your Honor, as I mentioned when entering the evidence, this is a report prepared by the doctor and brought here today. I actually just said that when entering it. Yes, if you were listening. We can check the recording if you'd like.
Oh, never mind.
So can you tell us a bit about this report that you prepared?
So Exhibit 2, I prepared this about 5 years ago when the defendant first went to trial. Because I am an expert at war crimes, the staff at BCRE asked me to help during the trial, and this is what I prepared.
And can you tell me what happened in the case of State v. Hunter Grooms when the defendant was sent to prison? What war crimes were they found to be guilty of?
Hunter Grooms was found guilty on the charges of war crimes, specifically for aggravated battle assault, vandalism to battle equipment, harming civilians not involved in battle, and inhibiting others from experiencing excitement.
Have you ever seen anything like this before? This many war crimes
This has been the worst case of war crimes I've ever seen at BCRE. Normally we have the regular cheating, while playing Texas Hold'em mostly.
Of course.
But other than that, there's normally amazing sportsmanship, and there's never any vandalism or harming of others.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you, counsel. Defense cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. So you said you had a political science major, yes?
Yes,
And that you are an expert in war crimes,
yes,
but you don't have any major in war crimes.
no. But that's part of my political science major. So political science deals with everything from imports and exports into a country, to politics, to war.
Really? Because I know some people who are going into political science for college, actually.
Objection. Relevance.
It is relevant to the case because if she's not, and if political science has nothing to do with her being an expert in war crimes, it could say that Mr. Grooms is not guilty of any of these war crimes that she has wrote.
I understand, counsel.
If they're not real
I'm
world
objecting
crimes.
to the fact that you know people going into political science. That has no bearing on today's case whatsoever.
But then it shows that I know that war crimes is not associated with political science.
Are you familiar with the Creative Political Science? You know somebody in the Creative
It
Universe?
does not say she got a doctorate from the creative political science.
This is the Creative Universe after all.
So everything is B-Cree automatically?
Well, yes, that's why
I
we're here.
did get a doctorate from BCRE University.
If that was important to this case,
Then it
and
would be
as
your
you mentioned it in your affidavit, why was the college you attended not mentioned in your affidavit?
Because it doesn't matter where I went, I'm an
I
expert.
feel like if
I
we
got my
knew what
doctorate.
college you were from, if it was a more well-renowned college or one that has a very high success rate for its students, I believe it would add to your credibility. And if you can't prove that you have gone to this college, it would greatly hurt.
Well,
How
I
dare
am
you
not-
insult BCRE University?
I'm just saying if she had not stated that. in her-
I am very successful in my profession.
Misogyny. Misogyny at work.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so then you do not have a major in war crimes at all?
No.
So
My
you
major, I have a doctorate in
Yeah.
political science.
Yeah, okay, but you wrote in Exhibit 2, Exhibit 2 over here, which you already have. Exhibit 2, you wrote the war crimes yourself, not having a war crimes doctorate at all.
So
And
as
not-
stated before with my political science major, I was brought in at Mr. Green's first trial to compile a list of war crimes anyone could commit.
Mr. Grooms.
Oh, sorry.
Lack of knowledge.
My mistake. I was brought in to compile a list of war crimes and then discuss the war crimes that Mr. Grooms committed.
Well, if I can tell you, Your Honor, that if they did not have an expert, well, they have an expert, but if they did not have someone majoring in war crimes who has studied it and has a certificate from Beacre University, which she also does not have a certificate that she has a degree from Beacre University
Your Honor.
or anything.
Grounds.
Is the council going to ask a question or just?
I'm stating something, you didn't let me finish.
You're not going to ask a question to our witness.
I
you
asked
have
the
a
judge if I could state to her something, and she said yes. Sustained, you mean overruled? Okay. That could mean that Lane, that these war crimes are not, should not be pushed on Lane,
Not Lane.
because, or
Hunter.
not Lane, Hunter, I'm sorry.
So we're saying different.
Okay,
Are you gonna ask the witness a question?
no, I was just gonna say that.
Oh, okay, great.
Your Honor, I would also like to take this time to make a statement since you so graciously allowed the other counsel
I'll
to.
allow it.
All I would like to say, Your Honor, at this time is I would like to remind you that the credibility is here. This witness did testify in the original trial in which the defendant was indeed found guilty, and there was no objections to their expertise at that time. Therefore, I would just like for you to note that I don't believe that there are any disputes.
Thank you. With no further witnesses, witness, you may step down. Thank you for your testimony. With no further witnesses, the prosecution now rests its case.
Yes, Your Honor.
Let's take a 5-minute recess and we'll resume this trial at 7:50.
All right.
Is everyone here and ready to proceed?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense, call your first witness. You may proceed when ready.
I would like to call Hunter Grooms to the stand. What is your name?
My name is Hunter Grooms.
And how long did you serve in the Beacre State Penitentiary?
I have been inside the penitentiary for about 5 years now.
And you have a record that states that you had good behavior, correct?
Correct. The only slight, if you will, on my record is when I accidentally overslept for roll call one day.
I would like to enter Exhibit 4 into evidence. The record.
No objection, Your Honor.
That shows that his record was perfect, except for the one accident. And you are familiar with a chainsaw, correct?
That is correct. Before the year in which I attended Camp Be Creative, I have been on the maintenance staff for multiple years, and I am well aware of all the equipment that is needed.
And you had access to all the equipment which was reported in the human foosball fire, correct?
That is correct. We would often use gasoline for the different motor vehicles whenever they needed it, or things such as the matches for starting all those lovely circle necks.
I think we already entered Exhibit 3 in the evidence.
That's correct.
Yeah. But here it is again if you need to look at it.
Thank you.
And you and other maintenance members spent a lot of time in the shed where all of those were located?
Correct. It was what you would most likely refer to as a hangout spot, a place to get away from campers when you needed some downtime.
And you don't believe that any of them framed you for this crime?
No, I just can't imagine any of those people that I got to know so well during my years at camp ever doing this to me or to another person.
And anyone who knows you would state that you are very honest and a very trustworthy person, correct?
I would like to believe so. I have always been very steadfast in my faith, and my faith has always told me to be kind, and it is also the way that my mother has raised me, and I will always honor my mother.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Prosecution? Prosecution.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Hunter, I only have a few questions for you today. Right?
Okay, sir.
You're aware that all the evidence in today's case points to you being guilty, isn't that right?
I am aware of this, yes. But I still wholeheartedly believe, and I know that my God believes that I am innocent, and my God knows.
Your God is very powerful. But that doesn't change the fact that your fingerprints were the only ones found on the spray can, right?
That is correct. I do believe so. We would often use the spray for different activities, and I'm not sure how they even got.
So, although I'd like to know, they did say we, but only fingerprints were theirs. And, of course, the only fingerprints on the gasoline were yours as well.
That's correct.
And even though you said that the maintenance staff all uses the supplies, your fingerprints were the only ones on any of the events tied to the tragedies in this case.
I am well aware of that fact, and I know it seems very hard, but I couldn't ever do that to another person.
I understand. It's hurts, but you also don't believe that any of your friends framed you.
I can't believe that because they have always been there for me, and I will always be there for them.
Your fingerprints were the only ones that were there, and you don't believe anyone framed you. And you want the judge to believe today that this is all just a coincidence?
Yes, coincidences happen more than you would think.
Okay. Happen more than you think. And you want this court to grant you a new trial simply on the fact that you behaved well in prison for 5 years? That's it?
I believe that it will show that I am incapable of committing such horrible acts. I mean, arson, to be blunt, is a very horrible and angry thing, and I have never tried to be angry in my life, and whenever I try, or whenever I do feel anger, I step back and I pray.
That's excellent, but you have been already convicted guilty in this case already, isn't that right?
That is correct.
No further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Witness, you may step down. Thank you. Counsel, call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, I would like to call Leslie Grooms to stand. Could you state your name for the records?
My name is Wesley Grooms.
Okay, and what is your relation to the defendant?
I am the mother of my son, Hunter Grooms. And I just want to say, I cannot believe that this man would call my child, my flesh and blood, a monster. Just,
We'll save that stuff for after the trial, okay? Now, what exactly was he like as a child?
He was the most well-behaved child I had ever known. It wasn't just, as he said, it wasn't just the 5-year prison sentence, or the 5 years after he was, I believe, wrongly convicted. It was also the entirety of his childhood before him. He never misbehaved. He was always an outgoing kid, and he always had a strong moral compass. He knew it was right. He would never do anything horrible like that.
See, when Hunter was volunteering at being creative, was he a good person?
He was.
As everyone?
He was, and in fact, I dropped him off originally because I figured he would love volunteering. And in fact, after a couple of weeks, I got a call from one of the full-time staff members that he was a model volunteer and he's been such a big help.
Objection, Your Honor.
State defense.
Hearsay, pursuant to Rule 802.
Defense, do you have an argument?
I don't think the mother would lie about things like David. So she mentions it in her affidavit.
May I respond, Your Honor? I understand the condition of the affidavit. Regardless of that fact, the statement was told to her and is now being offered for the truth of that matter, that Hunter was a model volunteer. We can't determine that without the person who made that statement present today.
Assistant.
Thank you, Your Honor. Alright. So, what was your reaction to the news of his quote-unquote crime?
I was in shock, but I knew deep down that my baby couldn't have done something like that. And so, as he gets his Christian faith from me, and so what I did is I fell on my knees and I prayed.
See. Your Honor, if it's okay, I would like to make a statement. So, so we all know about how well mothers know their child. They literally gave birth to them. So it is common knowledge that mothers would, like, if the child didn't know themselves best, then it would be the mother who knew them best. So I believe that if the mother knows that he didn't do anything wrong, then I think it's safe to say that he's not guilty. No further questions, Your Honor.
Prosecution, prosecution.
Yes, Your Honor. So, you sent your child to Butler Springs and then to volunteer eventually to go to camp, right? You sent them there, right?
I did send them there because I figured they would love it.
Uh-huh. And were you ever at Butler Springs? Especially, you weren't ever at Butler Springs, were you?
I was not because I was too busy being a mother.
I understand. So, you were present when all these alleged acts occurred, right?
No, not specifically. No, it's not.
And so you have no idea what actually happened at the camp, do you?
No, I'm not.
So beyond your experience with the defendant, before and after the alleged acts, you can't say a single thing about what happened at the time the alleged acts came. The only time that matters.
I guess not. But I can talk about his character.
Well, I understand, but the only character that matters is the character at the time. You would agree, right? No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Witness, Mr. Johnson, stand. Counsel, your final witness.
I would like to call Skylar Jackson.
My name is Skylar Johnson.
All right. And you've been working for the Be Creative State Penitentiary, is that correct?
Correct.
And how long have you been working there?
8 years.
All right. And how long have you known defendant Hunter Grooms?
5 years.
5 years. So you've known him the entire time that he's been.
Correct.
Now, you said that you've kept a watchful eye on him, and you've been observing him as much as you can for the time, is that correct?
Correct.
And how would you say that he seemed to act?
His behaviors were outstanding. There was a time where the alpha prisoner from the hippopotamus gang took his tray right from his hands, and he gave him his dessert as well. He didn't fight back. He surrendered and gave him a reward as well.
So you believe that you would certainly call Mr. Grooms here a very generous and honest person.
Very.
If you were to only know him from his life in prison and not of his previous trial, do you believe that he would even be accused of such an action that he has been 5 years ago?
I won't say he's ever done anything wrong. We're all not perfect. I promise you that one. But in this situation, this is a very tedious case. It's he's seen everything with hatred, anger, and insanity by everybody around him, everywhere, by every single person. It's been 5 years in a penitentiary, and all those 5 years were not very easy. I bet you it's not. You get all those people who want to fight and torture, because that's where everybody has a background history. But all he's asking for is a second chance. Isn't that what the Be True Universe does? Is offer second chances to everybody? And also, he just needs a second chance at another trial. He's asking, why can't he just receive?
No further.
Prosecution?
Mr. Johnson,
It's Miss Johnson.
Miss Johnson, okay. In your affidavit, you stated that you've never seen a prisoner convicted of a crime as heinous as the crimes that Hunter Green committed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then, in your affidavit, you also say you were suspicious of the defendant.
Yes,
That's
I was.
correct?
I was.
Okay. And then you also mentioned the gangs that's in the penitentiary.
Yes. The hippopotamus gang.
The hippopotamus gang. That's the only gang?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Do you think Hunter Green was in the gang?
Hunter Grooms, I don't believe, wasn't in the gang at all. They were too. Because of all the background history, I don't believe that they would even survive being in the gang.
And you also stated that you were afraid of the defendant. Is that correct? You said I was on high alert at this point with how constructed his sentence and his behavior were.
The first
You were
week we
afraid to let
met.
your guard down.
The first week we met, seemed very shy, and didn't know how to feel because I've heard all these things and all these rumors about what this Hunter Grooms did. I was hearing, oh, Hunter Grooms, ooh, it's such a bad guy.
So you were afraid of him?
I was afraid of him until I actually went to sit down and actually talk and get to know this person.
You also discussed, or you also said, that you were waiting for him to blow his angel cover. So you thought it was fake?
I thought he was faking, but he wasn't.
You thought it was all an act?
It was. I always believed that they were just acting to be kind, or acting as in acting of kindness, but no, the kindness was real.
And then when the defendant missed roll call, you were sure that you finally caught him in his angel act, correct?
Correct, but they were behind and didn't sleep.
Oh. But you assumed that he was planning to escape.
I did think that, but this was the first week.
You thought that because you knew that he was vicious, right?
No.
So why do you think that they were gonna plan to
First-
escape?
The first week was very hard for both of us.
Because he was committed a heinous crime.
Exactly.
You were afraid.
I was.
And then the defendant was reprimanded for missing roll call, correct?
Correct.
And then you mentioned that you thought it was his goal to be perfect, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Why do you think that was his goal, to be perfect in a penitentiary?
He wanted to prove that he was innocent.
But he was already convicted.
He made a lot of
A jury found him guilty.
a lot of people nowadays, and even in the past, get convicted of a crime they don't even do. And a lot of them get released years after because they found out that they were not guilty. Am I right?
In some cases, not all. I don't believe this case is like that. No further questions. Thank you.
Your Honor, may I make a statement?
Not this time. Thank you. Is there anything further?
I don't know, statement now.
Our closing
Is
statements.
there anything further?
Am I allowed to say something?
Yes, Your Honor, in fact, there is. Your Honor, the prosecution has just been informed by a phone call that there's going to be a surprise witness in today's case.
No.
Surprise.
I suppose so.
I knew it. I knew it.
Order in the court.
Surprise witness? Who?
Okay then.
It's Jesus.
Order in the court. Are we now ready for closing?
Not yet, I'm afraid. We need to hear what's going on with the surprise witness.
May I ask the witness questions?
Yes. Yes.
We need to hear what's going on.
Yeah, we
No here. Up on the talking.
Okay.
Who are you?
My name is Nevaeh King.
What do you know about this case?
I was there at the time that everything happened that week.
What do you know about the defendant, Hunter Grooms?
So I know that they are an upstanding person. Now, mind you, we all fail. So we're human.
What do you know about Be Creed?
I know that it is a camp at Butler Springs.
What do you know about the watermelon incident?
So I do know that the watermelon was stored in an area where I was doing some maintenance painting. So I believe in that time I may have contaminated said watermelon.
And what do you know about the tree cutting incident?
I don't know what happened fully, but I can say that Mr. Grooms is not at fault.
What do you know about the fire?
That it was a complete freak accident. The wiring in the old foosball building was very faulty, very old. With said rain and storm the night previously, there had been a surge that may have sparked that.
So in the end, what is the defendant's involvement in today's case?
I can confidently say that the defendant has zero involvement in these accused crimes.
In your opinion, what should happen to the defendant?
They should be excused and forgiven of the crimes and granted innocence and freedom.
No further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Any rebuttal from prosecution?
I believe we're ready for closing statements this time, Your Honor. All right, may I begin? All right, we'll now begin with closing statements. Your Honor, this is a simple case. Today, we've laid out all the facts. You've heard from our witnesses, each and every one of them telling you everything they know about this case. And everything's clear. We see what has happened here. We can let the facts speak for themselves in this case. This is an open and shut case. And I trust that you, Your Honor, will decide according to your conscience. After we've seen all the facts from their witnesses and our witnesses, all the statements were made in this trial, and after seeing everything that's happened, we let it all out. It's all come to light. We know everything that's happened in this trial. And I ask that we let the facts speak for themselves. Mr. Grooms, or Mrs. Grooms, Mr. Grooms, they should be judged according to their ways. We thank you so much for your service in this trial, Your Honor. We ask that you decide this case. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Mary Beth. Closing arguments.
Yes, Your Honor. For our burden, we were to prove that new evidence is available that could possibly change the original verdict, which we were given new evidence from Nevaeh King, who had just come up and testified that she could have that the watermelon was in her room and she could have spray painted it on accident, and she testified that Hunter Grooms was not at the scene where the trees were cut. We were also to prove there is some unfair injustice in the original case, which is that there wasn't enough evidence and that Hunter Grooms was falsely convicted. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you, counsel. Thank you all. With all that concludes the case of the state versus Hunter Grooms. One moment as I deliberate on the evidence presented before me today. Okay, I've reached my verdict. In today's case of State versus Grooms, I will grant the motion of the defense for a new trial for Mrs. Grooms.
So, really unexpected.